Apple supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo has just doubled down on something that could completely shake up Apple's Mac lineup. A brand new low-cost MacBook powered not by an M-series chipset but by an iPhone processor. According to Kuo, this machine's now on track to enter mass production in the fourth quarter of this year, which means a launch in either late 2025 or early 2026. And on top of this, DigiTimes claims it could start at just $599 to $699, instantly making it Apple's cheapest MacBook ever and putting it right up against Chromebooks, a market Apple's never really gone after. And the specs make this even more interesting. DigiTimes says this won't be just a cut down MacBook Air, it's rumored to have a slightly smaller 12.9-inch display, an ultra thin, lightweight design, and come in fun colours like silver, blue, pink, and yellow. Oh, and here's the kicker, it'll be powered by the A18 Pro chipset, the same chipset that debuted in the iPhone 16 Pro last year, making it the very first Mac to ship with an iPhone processor instead of an M-series chipset. We first had whispers about this back in late June when analyst Ming-Chi Kuo revealed Apple was working on a more affordable 13-inch MacBook to compete with Chromebooks and drive sales in the lower end of the market. Kuo said mass production was likely in late Q4 2025 or early 2026, but DigiTimes' new timeline, with component production ramping up by the end of Q3, does suggest assembly could start sooner, and if that happens, there's a slim chance we see this thing announced before the end of this year, maybe around October or November. Before we get further into the details, if you're into this kind of Apple news, the obscure supply chain leaks, the things you won't hear about in a standard press release, hit the subscribe button. It helps way more than you think, and we're trying to hit 20,000 subscribers right now, and I've got a lot more deep dives like this on the way. Now, I know this idea of putting an iPhone chip into a MacBook might sound like a step backwards. Apple spent years moving the Mac lineup from Intel to custom Apple Silicon, the M1, M2, M3, and now M4, which are basically scaled up A-series chipsets with more cores, more memory support, better graphics, and pro-level capabilities. Dropping an iPhone class chipset into a Mac might feel counterintuitive, but zoom out and it makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider cost and Apple's current market positioning. The A18 Pro is already in mass production for iPhones, so Apple doesn't need to keep older chip production lines alive. They can just repurpose a current generation chipset, saving on R&D and manufacturing. It's the same playbook they've used before with the iPhone SE and the base iPads. Reuse proven components in a new form factor to hit a lower price point. And because iPhone chips are made in far greater volume than Mac chips, Apple gets scale efficiency, which helps them protect margins. And you know Tim loves protecting margins. Performance-wise, the A18 Pro should be roughly in the same ballpark as the original M1, which for a lot of consumers is still more than enough. My M1 MacBook Air can still handle 4K video editing without breaking a sweat, so for students, casual users, or anyone who mainly browses, streams, and works on docks, the A18 Pro is fine. The real win is that it's also going to be built for Apple Intelligence, with a modern neural engine optimized for Apple's AI features, so even if some of those are still coming soon, this MacBook will be future-proofed when Apple eventually fully rolls out Apple Intelligence. Where it does get more strategic is pricing. Apple's current entry-level MacBook is the M4 MacBook Air that starts at $999, and that's already competitive in the premium space, but it's still a big ask for students and budget-conscious buyers. The Chromebook market, which Apple's never really competed in directly, dominates US school sales largely because you can get a half-decent one for under $500. If Apple launches a new MacBook at $599, they instantly become a viable option for that audience. And here's the thing, Chromebooks have had their moment, but they've always been a compromise. They're fine for web browsing and cloud apps, but offline performance is weak, the app ecosystem is limited, and if you suddenly need pro-level software like Photoshop or Final Cut, you're out of luck. A $599 MacBook, even with some compromises, would give you the full macOS experience, a proper desktop class OS with access to pro software, better build quality, and long-term software updates that Chromebooks simply can't match. In fact, this wouldn't be the first time Apple's tried to go budget with a Mac. We've seen a few attempts in the past. The white polycarbonate MacBook from the late 2000s was Apple's student laptop before the Air existed, starting at $999 but often discounted. The 12-inch Retina MacBook from 2015 aimed for ultra portability but launched at $1299, making it more expensive than the Air and too underpowered for the price. And then there's the iBook back in the early 2000s, which was pitched as a more affordable Mac for schools, but it still wasn't in Chromebook pricing territory. This new A18 MacBook would be different. At $599 to $699, Apple would be undercutting their own MacBook Air by hundreds of dollars, while still offering something far more capable than most Windows laptops in that range. It could finally give Apple a true entry-level laptop without feeling like a toy in the range. Now, DigiTimes says the display will be 12.9 inches, smaller than the current 13.6-inch MacBook Air, but bigger than the old 12-inch MacBook. That hints that Apple could be using a totally new chassis size, maybe something ultra portable but without the compromises of the old fanless model. The 2015 MacBook was impressively light and thin, but it also was criticized for being underpowered and overpriced. This new model could finally deliver on the original vision, a super portable, stylish MacBook that's actually affordable, but it is actually surprising to me that Apple's giving this a new chassis in the first place, since in the past base models usually get recycled shells, but I guess a 12-inch MacBook is too old to recycle, and it also can't be too similar to a MacBook Air. Color options are also a big part of the story. Silver, blue, pink, and yellow scream base model Apple, think colourful iMacs and iPads, and that makes perfect sense if it's aimed at students and first-time Mac buyers. Personally, I hope they go bold. The current sky blue on the MacBook Air looks almost silver in certain lighting, and if you're going to make a colourful MacBook, make it pop Apple, give us a deep rich blue or bright saturated pink that actually stands out on a desk. But let's talk about compromises, because of course, there will be compromises. The A18 Pro does not support Thunderbolt, so expect regular USB-C ports instead. That's fine for the price, but it means no ultra-fast external drives or multiple 6K monitors. RAM's likely going to start with 8 gigs, maybe with a 16 gig option, but I wouldn't be surprised if Apple tries to limit the higher RAM tiers to the Air and Pro lines. External display support will almost certainly be limited to one display, and GPU performance won't touch what the M4 MacBook Air offers. This is certainly not for video professionals, 3D artists, or developers running multiple virtual machines. It's for students, office workers, and casual users who just want the macOS experience without paying premium pricing. And because it's Apple, I fully expect one controversial omission. It's almost tradition at this point. The 10th generation iPad did not support the 2nd gen Apple Pencil, the 16E skipped out MagSafe, so don't be shocked if this MacBook launches without Touch ID, or maybe even without True Tone. They'll compromise in just enough so they can nudge more consumers towards the Air. From a market perspective, this could be huge though. DigiTimes projects Apple could sell 5 to 7 million of these per year, boosting MacBook shipments by up to 40%. That's a massive growth opportunity at a time when the overall PC market is pretty stagnant, and because it's based on an iPhone chipset, manufacturing costs are lower and margins are better. Apple gets more consumers without sacrificing profit. The real wild card is launch timing. Kuo says mass production is going to begin in late Q4 2025 or early 2026, but DigiTimes says that component ramp-up could begin earlier, and that could suggest assembly could start this year. If that's the case, there is a slim but real possibility this gets announced in October or November this year. We aren't actually expecting any M5 MacBook Pros to launch this year, so maybe the only Mac release we get in the second half of the year is this new MacBook. Imagine Apple dropping a $599 MacBook right before the holiday season. That would be an instant headline grabber. Of course, that also raises the question, what happens to the iPad in this price range? The iPad has always been Apple's answer to, I just want a cheap computer, but it's never fully replaced a laptop for most consumers. If a $599 MacBook does exist, it could cannibalize some iPad sales, but Apple probably doesn't care if it means keeping people in the macOS ecosystem instead of losing them to Windows or Chrome OS. So the big question for you guys, would you buy a MacBook with an iPhone chip inside if it meant saving $300 to $400 compared to a MacBook Air? Does the price outweigh the compromises, or would you rather pay more for an M-series chipset and Thunderbolt ports? Personally, I think if Apple gets the design right, keeps the colors vibrant, and nails the price point, this could be a very popular machine, but it's probably not for me because I do video edit regularly, and so I'm probably going to stick to a MacBook Air Pro. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, especially these deep dives into the leaks and supply chain reports before they hit the mainstream, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's a lot more coming on this machine, and I'll be covering every detail right until Apple makes it official.